Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right, cool.
How you doing?
Doing pretty good. Just been relaxing and enjoying my time in quarantine. How about yourself?
I'm okay, man. It's a strange day. Is this the new house you're walking around in?
Yeah, I'm still trying to move and get everything situated.
Are you in Houston? Where are you?
No, I'm in Dallas.
Oh, you're in Dallas. Okay.
Yeah. So just been enjoying it. Just, how it is when you're moving in, you gotta get everything situated and it doesn't help that we're in a quarantine time. So
Right, right. Well, a million thanks for doing this.
oh yeah, no problem. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, we'll cover a bunch of stuff. I mean, obviously, I want to end up with talking about faith, but I want to talk about your book too and football. Is there anything you want to, if there's anything you want to make sure and cover, something you have coming up or whatever? So, talk about how you've been doing during this quarantine. Where were you when you found out it was like lockdown?
Uh, I think when they started going on lockdown, I was in Austin. So I was in Austin visiting my girl, but I mean, Seattle was already pretty much on lockdown, and it was just a matter of when it was going to get to Texas.
Right, right, yeah. So how do you process this? Because I mean, this disrupts everybody's life. In your rhythm, you should be starting spring stuff. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we were supposed to start back in football, I think, like April 19th or so, but they ended up canceling it. But I think for the most part, the quarantine hadn't really affected me as much because this is literally how I grew up my whole entire life. Like I go to practice, or whatever, and then I'll come home and then I'll just watch TV or play video games. So like one of my biggest hobbies growing up was just watching TV or watching movies. That's what I used to do with my mom. And so since we're on quarantine, like I'm still doing the same thing that I've always would have been doing. And
Playing video games and
yeah, and I'm playing against all my friends. And when it comes to working out, like I never really went to a facility to work out. I always worked out on my own. So that's why I said, the only difference is they're trying to tell everybody like make sure y'all stay inside. But for the most part, that's what I've always done.
it's you've been living the quarantine life before it was popular.
Yeah, like I'll go out every now and then, whether it was to a restaurant, but it was always to pick up food. It wasn't to sit there,
Right.
or I'll go to a movie and sit out at a movie. But other than that, I might have went to some basketball games or did different stuff like that. But since they canceled sports, it's not like I can just figure out different stuff to be able to do, like whether it's, just walk around the neighborhood or ride a bike around the neighborhood or just go to the backyard and just sit outside and just kind of look at the sky or look at, the neighborhoods around. I mean, it's a lot of different stuff that you can do. Like I took this time to get to know my girl more, I'm talking to my family more since you can't really do that as much as you want to whenever everybody's busy and occupied. So I mean, I just try to look for the pros in a, pandemic like this to where it's not like I'm sitting here scared on whether I get it or not, but I'm more so taking advantage of ideas and opportunities. And I also told one of my bros today, this is what it's gonna look like when you retire. Like when you retire,
Yeah.
you're not gonna have the entertainment world anymore. So you got to figure out what you're gonna do when you're done. And so I mean, this gives you a chance to work on your plan B and to do all those different types of things to where if plan A doesn't work anymore or if it stops working before you want it to, you're already in a good place to start your life outside of sports.
That's good. Yeah, do you consider yourself an introvert?
Uh, I don't know. I think I can be both. It just depends on who I'm around and what type of energy I have that day.
I got your book and I was reading through it. I love the way you 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 would give people a thought, and then you give them a chance to work it out. You'd give assignments. You'd have your self-talk here. I mean, in one page 35, you have this little note to self. What good is it to achieve so much in life if you can't even be yourself? Why am I worried about living up to other people's expectations? People lose themselves trying to please others. If I live to please others, then I'm never going to be free. I'm tired of living in a prison. I mean, these are thoughts. This is deep stuff, man. And you're asking people to go to a deep place. So when I read that, I thought, Tyler's got some introspection in there. Where does that come from? That kind of stuff.
I think it just comes from honesty. Like I feel like a lot of times to tell the God given truth because they got to sugarcoat it because people don't want to. They think that sometimes people can't handle the entire truth, and I think sometimes like we're just good with knowing, like I said, the trial run of what the truth presents, but not the full thing. So like for me, I just realized that a lot of times you have to be able to be honest with yourself 100% wholeheartedly before you could truly be free. And a lot of people are only telling, like I said, the trial run to where people can see, oh, this is your testimony or this is what you've overcame. But there, that's just something that they feel comfortable with sharing because the real testimony is what they're hiding behind closed doors. And if you get to a point where you're scared to show your real scars or you're scared to show your true testimony, how can that be a testimony if you're scared to share it because you're scared of what other people will think? Sometimes you don't even have to reveal the whole entire thing, but if you're ashamed of what you've overcame, then that can't be a testimony until you're okay with being able to share it, knowing that the blood has already covered it and all those different types of
Right.
things. So I think for me, it was just being able to understand that sometimes the only way out of a real hectic situation or a spiritual battle is being able to be honest with yourself and finding ways to be able to combat it in a spiritual warfare type of way.
So when people hear you talk like that, I mean, people who have a spiritual component, I think they get it. But a lot of people, and we talked about this a few years ago when we were walking through the VMAC together. A lot of people see Tyler Lockett and they go, "Tough times? What's he talking about? He's a Pro Bowl superstar, one of the top receivers in the National Football League. He's got money, he's got influence, he's young, he's successful." Speak to people right now who have stuff going on about what it means for you to be in a tough time, because some people are just so enamored with the image of what it must be like to be Tyler Lockett that it's probably hard for them to get around that you've seen the valley. You haven't just seen the mountaintop. You know what the valley's like too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that people only see me and they see what I did or what I've been doing for the last 5 years, that yeah, they don't really see that there's any struggle or suffering going on. But, I think it goes back to they don't understand how a kid grows up. You know what I mean? They don't understand the neighborhoods that the kid is in or
Right.
the environment that the kid is around and
Right.
how some of his friends get taken down a dark path or people that he's been around gets taken down a dark path and he's trying to stay true with some of the same friends that got the same type of mindsets. Like, they don't it's I mean, it's a lot of stuff that a lot of people don't get that you can dive into and talk about for a long, long time. But I think even in this the stuff that they know for the last 5 years, I mean, you can sit here and say he has the money, he has the means to do any and whatever he wants. But people don't understand that with money comes struggle, just like without money comes struggle.
Yep.
They don't understand that with having like the same opportunity that you were praying for is the same opportunity that you complain about
Yep.
once you've been in it for a long time. So people don't really realize how things change once you start to get what you want and how people change around you. and how some people want to be taken care of and how some people don't want to be taken care of, or some people start to use things against you, or you lose some of your closest friends, or you lose family members. But also, like, the thing that I will respond back to people, even in a spiritual way, who say that you got it good. Jesus said that it's hard for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. So obviously, there's something that he knew that he said that other people don't realize or understand, because even during this pandemic, you start to realize that all the things that you once used to cope with can't save you anymore. Like,
Right.
some people used to get away and go lift, or some people used to get away to go to do training or to go do different types of things, even if it was bad, unhealthy ways that they coped with things. You can't do any of that stuff anymore because all these places are closed. So now, what's your way of coping with your problems? You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people give in to, like, people look forward to going to all these places because they can't stand being inside of their house. And they don't understand that it's not the house that makes the person, it's the person that makes the house. It doesn't matter how big your house is or how small it is. Like, it's about what you do with the space that you have. And
Right.
so I think for me, that's the biggest thing that, I've learned, and that's the biggest thing that I've been doing, is because people get so caught up in possessions to where they think that that's their source. When things like this happen and you can't use your source anymore, what do? People always wanted to brag and show the nicest stuff and clothes and stuff that they had, but now you can't do that. Like, it's the stores are closed down. Like, you can order it online, but what good is it to order it online if you can't wear it out and about? So you start to see the things that everybody has made their god, or at least their source, or that's giving them a glimpse of what happiness is like, or what fulfillment is like. They can't use that right now. And so you really have to question yourself and question who you really are, because you don't have money to spend. You don't have people to hang out with. You don't have all these different types of things. If churches are closed and you can only watch them online, what are you doing to continue to further yourself to live for God? Because if you've only dependent on all of these things to keep you going, now that you don't have that anymore, does your world stop, or does your world keep going?
I love that. Now let's talk about faith, because Seattle's a pretty secular place, and you have a real loud voice in Seattle. People care about you and your influence. That's one of the reasons I want to say thank you, by the way, for taking your personal time to be a part
Oh
of
yeah, no
Easter
problem.
Sunday, man. You've been so generous with me over the years, and you've talked to a lot of thousands and thousands of people. Together we have. But when you speak to people who you know are secular, it's Easter Sunday. Who is Jesus? Who do you tell them Jesus of Nazareth is to Tyler Lockett? And why is Jesus so important to you?
Yeah, well, I think the way that I explain my faith and who Jesus is to me is, I try to take them out of that experiment that they've experienced their whole entire life, of what other people did wrong to them, and what church might have said to them, or whatever the case is. Because I try to get them to understand that the way that I read the Bible is, I read it as if it was a history book, and I read it and I just let them know, like, I read it and I'm just listening and reading to whatever it is that the people want me to know that lived in that time. And as I'm reading First John, and they're saying, "This is what we've seen. This is what we've heard. This is what we've touched.
Right.
We've witnessed these things, and we're here to tell you." And so it's like, as I'm reading this as if I'm listening to what it is that they're trying to tell me to get across, because they're saying, "This is what we believed in our time.
Right.
This is why, because we've seen him heal this person. We've seen him bring Lazarus from the dead." And so when you see that, I'm telling people that as you read, you choose whether or not you want to believe in that same God that was there during that time, because they said that he rose from the dead. We might have never been there, but that's why, the Bible also says, when he told Thomas, "Blessed are those who don't see." You know what I mean?
Right.
It's being able to understand first, getting them to understand, like, who Jesus is, but also being able to provide them a story of about if we don't have a source of that we believe in, we create our own rules to live by. And when we don't live up to those rules, we condemn our own selves. Or sometimes people don't condemn themselves. But the way that I've been explaining it to people lately is during this pandemic, we go to the grocery store, we buy the things that we want, and we buy the things that we need. Some of the things that we want aren't healthy for us, but
Right.
the things that we need, we know is going to be able to help us tremendously down the road. You know what I mean? Like toilet papers,
Yeah.
soap, hand sanitizers, all those things. But when it comes to like certain foods, we get unhealthy foods, we get all this different stuff. And so I tell them that when we're ready to go take our cart to be able to get out, and a person is scanning it, once it's already scanned and we're pulling out our money to go buy it, the person just says you're good. And you're like, hold on, like I want to pay for it. Like I don't want to be good. And they're like, no, you're good. It's been taken care of.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter what you got, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, you still feel short of the price that you had to pay. And so being able to know that it didn't matter what you brought in that grocery store and what you took out, it was already paid for to the fact that you didn't have to experience that same thing.
Yeah.
And so I just try to explain things like that in a way to where they understand, but also I know that sometimes you just got to meet people where they're at, because the biggest thing I learned is one of the verses said, like something like I planted the seed, Apollos watered the seed, but God made the seed grow. And so I realized that it's not on me to make something grow. It's just on me to plant the seed or water it. So whether it's having conversation, whether it's just being there for somebody or giving somebody time, you start to realize that those are the things that plant, those are the things that water. And when it's time for it to be grown, it'll be grown in its own way.
Yeah.
But it allows me to meet them where they're at. And just like when Paul said, I became a Jew to win over the Jew. And
Right.
so, you make yourself weak to win over the weak. And sometimes you learn things about yourself that you got to fix, because, when you become weak, you can't allow your desires to take over when you become weak. And so you just become like who you have to become like, but that takes a lot of self discipline and it takes a lot of strength to be able to overcome those things. But you got to know yourself before you make yourself become like whoever you're trying to help.
That's good, man. You have good recall, man. Your memory on verses, man. You're pulling it up.
Yeah, I don't remember. I can't tell you where a lot of the verses
Yeah,
are, but
but
I
you
just
got the
remember
yeah.
some of the verses because that's how I used to think and operate.
Yeah. I've been reading John also, and at the end of the Gospel of John, he says this sentence. In fact, it's my message today for Easter, but he says that if everything Jesus did had been written down, the world could not contain the books because he did so much more than even is in scripture. And
Yeah.
I mean, and I love that because it's 2020. We're 2,000 years later. He's still doing miracles for Tyler. He's doing it for Dean. He's doing it for people and I think right now we're hearing about this pandemic, but we're going to hear about miracles that come out of this pandemic, like marriages that were breaking up, but this time forced these people back together and made them sit face to face and work it out. Or people that instead of just going in their room and getting hammered every day for 2 months, they put down the bottle and they got free. I mean, people can get free every day because of Jesus. When you look back at Tyler before Jesus was central. I mean, I know you had a religious background, and we've all been around church people enough to know that some people attend church and some people know Jesus. They're not necessarily the same thing. Before Jesus, how was Tyler different?
I mean, I think I was pretty much the same. I just didn't really want to go to church or anything. I think I've always been good with peer pressure and stuff like that, but I think I think growing up, there's a lot of stuff that you don't know is wrong or right, and so you don't really know anything until you start reading and understanding. So
Right.
when people try to tell you like, "Oh, you can't do this or you can't do that," it's like, bro, who are you to tell me this? Like, you don't know if I can't or, do that. But it's because they were speaking on a level that they knew. And at that time, I was speaking on a level that I knew. And
Right.
so I just think that, regardless any of the things that I did or things that happened, I never really considered it wrong. And I can't allow the knowledge that I had once I learned about God to dictate the things that I did when I didn't know.
Yeah, so you're not living in a bunch of guilt about what you did when you didn't know any better.
Yeah, well, I think that's where a lot of the guilt and stuff comes from is like even when you grow, you start to look back. Like even for me, like one of the things that where we grew up at, I mean, you didn't see no moms and they dads being together. Like it was always like single mothers raising their kids, or you'll see like a single father raising his kid, but it wasn't to where parents were together. And if they were, it's like, they not really together now. And so the way up, it was okay to talk to multiple people if you had a girlfriend or whatever the case was. And
Right.
then as you started to grow older, you started to see that it's good for you to just be with one person and to settle down with one person. But
Right.
when people try to tell you that, they might have grew up in a whole different environment in a whole different state, and they're sitting here telling you stuff about, no, it's supposed to go like this, family dinners and blah blah blah. And you like, man, we don't eat at a table. Like we get our food and go to our, so it's like I just think based off of how you grow up, you learn a whole different side of it as you get older, and
Yeah.
it just teaches you things that you didn't know or things that you want to be able to get better at. So I think like for me, like that's a lot of the stuff that you learned was it was okay to talk to multiple people and do this and do that. And you realize that you broke people's hearts, or, there's things that even I learned today that I did, you know what I mean? And you'll look at it and be like, dang, like, why'd I have to do that? I feel like a bad person, blah, blah, blah. But you just got to realize, and that's what I told myself, is that if I fall short with God, then why am I worried about if I fall short with this girl that's my girlfriend or my best friend in my life? Because
I
if
like
I if if I start trying to please them, I'm still gonna fail. Even if I give them what they want, I still failed at something else that they're gonna come back on and tell me about. So it's like if I fall short with God, I'm gonna fall short with them. But all the things that you do to a person is because you aren't fully right in your relationship with God. So once you get fully right with God, you get fully right with that person, because that God, that spirit in you will teach you how to be able to love that person and be patient with that person, and to be able to help that person. But I started to realize that, in the world that we live in, we can say that anything is cheating. But I started reading the Bible as far as like when I would look at a verse, and when it said love is patient, I realized that if I'm not patient with this person, then that's me cheating. You know what I mean? That's how I started viewing it. Like if love is self-seeking, if I've looked for my own type of my way today with this person, then I've cheated. Because if love is supposed to be what Jesus is saying that it is, any other way that I operate around that is sin. And so I just started to learn that, and I started to kind of teach myself that, to where now all of a sudden you start to try to walk as Jesus did, like he said in First John, and you start to realize that even as I walk as him, I'm gonna fall, but there's unmerited grace that's there to be able to pick me up again. And so I'm learning like there's things that you should tell your significant other, and there's things that you shouldn't tell your significant other. But I'm learning, you can't treat your significant other as if they're God, because they're telling you how they want you to be for them, but they don't even want you to be that once you become that.
Yeah.
And so that's why I said it's just stuff that you start to learn, because this helps you to be able to love other people.
Yeah.
I feel like that's why God said, look, like at the end of the day, a person is not going to ever know how they truly want to be loved, because once they get it, they don't want it. So if I tell you that love is patient and it always wins and it never fails and it doesn't give up, if you hold on to those aspects of what love is, don't hold on to their ways. Don't hold on to the things that they do. You know what I mean? Because if you get caught up in what they do, then you're not going to be able to forgive. And one of the things that I was going to tell you too is I was watching this thing with my girl on YouTube, and it was actually a story that I seen. It was called Let It Go and all this other stuff moving forward. And they said that it was two monks that was walking to their destination. And as they walked, one of the monks saw a woman on the ground. So he stopped and he picked her up and took her with them as they were walking down the road. And eventually he ended up letting her go because I guess her time was, had ended. So he let her go, and not as ended, like she was still alive, but he let her go so they can continue to their destination. So as soon as they continued and got to their destination, the other monk said to the guy who picked up the woman, he said, "Why'd you pick her up and carry her? You know, we as monks don't touch women." And the monk said, "Are you still carrying her along with you? I dropped her a long time ago."
Ah, I love that.
And that's when you realize that other people still carry things in their head, though they never even picked up the thing that they're carrying. And the
Yeah.
person that carried it ended up just dropping it. And it shows you the person that's living in the now and the person that's still carrying what's happened behind.
Tyler, that's gold, man. If people just get that, it'll change their life.
Yeah, and it makes sense because that's like when Paul said, "One thing that I do, though he hasn't done it, he hasn't achieved it, but he said he strives to move forward and not to look back." And I think that when you look back, you're resurrecting something that's already happened in life, and there's no way to change it.
Preach it. That's good.
Yeah, you gotta accept it, and you gotta keep moving forward.
Now, on a personal note, you sort of mentioned marriage over here, and our mutual friend Matt Welch tells me there's a pretty significant lady in your life. Do you want to make an announcement on Easter Sunday about future wedding? Should I get my tuxedo ready? I mean, what's
See, like I said, I'm living in the now. Thought that far. I'm taking it one day at a time and just trying to enjoy the life that we have. Because at the end of the day, once it's gone, it's gone. So
Yeah.
I don't wanna, make a decision too early. I believe that you can make decisions too early, and sometimes those early decisions can haunt you, and sometimes they end up working out for the best because you learn how to work through it. But I also believe that you got to be patient and just kind of let stuff play out because there's things that each person has to learn before they can get to that place of even ready to be married. And some people have mindsets that when you're married, you're not supposed to still have these type of mindsets as a man, or you're not supposed to still deal with these things that you dealt with as a teenager. And it's like, no, like this stuff doesn't change. Like people still come to talk to you when you're married. People still will throw themselves at you. People still will try to take me away from you. Like, you know what I mean? And vice versa. And I think that sometimes people's whole marriage mindset is messed up because they don't realize that, it's more so of a partnership. You know
Yep.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Doing this together. And you got to remember, like, the only way that I could please you is having God. And the only way that you could please me is having God. Because if we try to please one another, then of course this marriage is never going to work because I'm never going to give you the time that you want. I'm never going to give you as much like cuddling or whatever the case that you want. And I think that for me, it helps you along with your walk because you understand how to be able to meet somebody where they're at. They might not be like some people might not be the woman or God that a man wants them to be at right now. Just like a man might not be the man or God a woman wants them to be right now. But like the thing about love and the reason why people are able to be patient with somebody and all those other aspects that Jesus talks about is because you got to see them for who they can be. And I think that when Jesus, when God made him who knew no sin to be sin, so that we might become the righteousness of him, it's like you start to realize that he's seen us for who we could be, not because we could get there ourselves, but he's seen who we can be, and that's how he treated us. And so that way it's easy for you to be patient with somebody. Like if I knew that you were gonna be the next Russell Wilson, and right now it was going to take you about 8 to 10 years. But if I already seen how good you can be it's going to be easier for me to be patient with you
Yeah.
rather than somebody who I know doesn't have even close to potential.
Yeah.
Well, let me read you this. It says, I want to dedicate this book to you, the person reading this. And then you say three things. You say, you matter, you always have, and you always will. I want you to just look at the camera because there will be thousands and thousands of people watching this. I want you to tell me why you wrote this. Where does that come from? You matter, you always have, you always will.
Because I think the biggest thing that you realize is that as people have lived, they reasons why they do the things that they do. And a lot of people, they like one of the things that Pastor Mike Ty used to tell us at youth church was that people look for love, acceptance, and fulfillment. And so you find that a lot of people do a lot of these things to be able to get those same things. They achieve the unachievable because they want to be approved by their family, or they want to be able to be seen as this person that achieved the most that a human being could ever achieve, whether it's in a job or a sport. And so I just think that, we look for fulfillment, and that's what competition brings in this life. And I think that people look for love because they never had it, or they don't know what it's about or what it is, because they give it so much and they question if that's what it's supposed to be. And then when you look for acceptance, people are willing to go to the extreme to do anything that doesn't match who they really are within themselves just to be accepted, because if they become who they truly are, then they're not accepted. And so I just think that with the book, I just wanted to say that you matter, because I think that's the thing that everybody wants to know is what I'm doing, does that matter? And me as a person, do I matter? And I think that's why a lot of people deal with mental health and all those different types of aspects of life, because they haven't really gotten the words that you matter.
I couldn't agree more. Hey, man, happy Easter. Thanks for
Happy Easter, you too.
thanks for what you've done for this community, and thanks for sharing your story on Easter Sunday. If you could just look at the camera straight on, you're going to be one of the first voices they hear on Easter Sunday is going to be your voice. Would you give them a hello?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. It's Tyler Lockett from the Seattle Seahawks. And I want to let you know that you matter. And if you don't believe that, then just listen and see what Jesus did for you on this day.
Beautiful. Tyler, thanks, man.
Yeah,
I know,
no problem.
I know you're busy, and we'll be in touch. But thanks again. Blessings to you, buddy. I want to